My brother-in-law called me a burden on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the exact moment because I had just finished replacing a cracked window frame in the basement, the same basement I had converted into a proper guest suite 17 years ago when my wife Eleanor and I first bought this house together on Elgin Street in Ottawa. Gerald, he said, not even looking up from his phone, we need to talk about the living situation. He was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking my coffee, wearing the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I am 66 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed electrician in the Ottawa Valley, and I built more of this house with my own hands than any contractor we ever hired. I know every circuit, every junction box, every load-bearing wall. I know which step on the staircase creaks at 3 in the morning and exactly how many pounds of pressure it takes to unstick the back door in February. This was not simply a house I lived in. This was the place Eleanor and I raised our daughter Claire, where we had Christmas dinners that ran past midnight, where Eleanor kept her garden along the south fence every summer until the summer she couldn't anymore. Eleanor passed away 14 months before that Tuesday afternoon, ovarian cancer. We had 11 months between the diagnosis and the end, and I spent every one of those days with her. After she was gone, Claire came home for the funeral, stayed 3 weeks, and then returned to Vancouver where she had built her own life. I understood. I told her I understood. What I did not expect was that 4 months later, she would call me to say that she and her husband Derek were planning to move back to Ottawa, back into the house on Elgin Street, so that they could keep an eye on me. I was touched. I told her that was generous, that I would love the company, that the house had been quiet for long enough. I even prepared the main guest room for them and put fresh shelving in the closet because Eleanor always said the closet in that room was too shallow. They arrived in early March. By mid-April, Derek had begun referring to the house as our place. I noticed it first in small ways. He rearranged the garage without asking. He replaced Eleanor's rose bushes along the south fence, the ones she had planted herself in 2009, with ornamental gravel because, he said, it was lower maintenance. When I asked him about it, he said Claire had agreed it was time to update the property. Claire would not meet my eyes when I brought it up with her. By May, Derek had started bringing friends over on Friday nights. Loud evenings that ran past 11, sometimes past midnight. When I mentioned, politely, that I was finding it difficult to sleep, Derek said that I should think about whether this setup is really working for everyone. I did not understand, at first, what he meant by that. I understood by June. Derek sat me down in my own living room, in the armchair that had been mine for 20 years, and told me that he and Claire had been discussing the future of the property. He used that word specifically, property. He said that since Eleanor had left the house jointly to Claire and me in her will, and since Claire was her only child, it made practical sense for them to take over the primary residence. He had already spoken to a real estate lawyer, he said. He had already looked into my options. My options. In my own home. There's a very nice retirement community in Canada, he said, sliding a glossy brochure across my coffee table. Claire and I thought it might suit you, give you more independence. I looked at that brochure for a long time. Then I looked at my daughter, who was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, not saying a word. Claire, I said, is this what you want? She said, Dad, it might be easier for everyone. I had rewired the electrical panel in this house in 2003 to bring it up to current code. I had replaced the roof in 2011 after an ice storm. I had refinished every hardwood floor by hand. I had installed the kitchen cabinets that Derek was now storing his protein supplements in. I said I would need time to think about it. Derek said I had until the end of the month. That was a Friday. I spent the weekend in a kind of fog. I walked through the house slowly, touching things the banister I had sanded and restained, the tiles in the front entry I had laid myself, the window in Eleanor's old sewing room that still had the small crack in the lower left corner that I had never quite gotten around to replacing because she said she liked the way the light came through it. On Monday morning, I drove to my own bank branch on Bank Street. I had not looked at Eleanor's accounts in several months. After she died, I had managed the immediate estate matters with the help of our family solicitor, a woman named Patricia Okafor, who had handled our wills and property transfer, but there were still some accounts I had not fully sorted through. Eleanor had been meticulous with money in a way that I never quite was. She had kept records in a small green ledger that she updated by hand every month. I had always trusted her to manage the household finances because she was better at it than I was, and because some part of me found comfort in the fact that she was better at certain things and I was better at others. That was the architecture of our marriage. I brought her green ledger to the bank, I also brought an old savings passbook I had found in the back of her desk drawer while going through her papers after the funeral, one I did not recognize, from a financial institution I did not know she had an account with. The teller was a young man, polite and efficient. He looked at the passbook, typed for a moment, and then stopped. He looked at his screen again. Then he picked up his phone and said, quietly, "I'm going to need a manager to assist with this." I assumed there was some problem with the account. A closure issue, perhaps, or some administrative flag from the estate process. The branch manager was a woman in her 50s named Diane. She came out from her office, shook my hand, and asked me to come inside and sit down. She closed the door behind us. She said, "Mr. Whitmore, are you aware of the balance in this account?" I told her I was not. She turned her monitor toward me. Eleanor had been quietly depositing money into that account for over 20 years. She had done it methodically, modestly, small transfers, proceeds from a small rental property she had inherited from her own mother in the 1990s and managed entirely herself, investment returns she had reinvested without ever mentioning to me. Not because she was hiding it from me in any harmful way, I would come to understand, but because she had always worried about what would happen to me if something happened to her first. She had told her solicitor. She had put it in a separate document attached to her will. The balance in that account was $412,000. I sat in that chair in Diane's office for a long time without speaking. Eleanor had known. She had known that at some point I might be left alone. She had known that I was not careful with money in the way she was. She had quietly, patiently, built something for me, a wall between me and whatever might come. She had done it over 2 decades without ever making me feel like she doubted me, without ever using it as a point of pride or leverage. She had simply done it because that was who Eleanor was. I thought about the gravel where her rose bushes used to be. I called Patricia Okafor from the bank parking lot. Patricia was direct in the way that good solicitors are direct. She told me what I needed to hear. Eleanor's will, she explained, had transferred the house on Elgin Street to me and Claire, as joint tenants with right of survivorship, which meant that upon Eleanor's death, the property passed to both of us. However, she said, because I had been the original purchasing owner when we first bought the property, and because Eleanor and I had held the title in a specific way that Patricia herself had advised us on years ago, my interest in the property was primary. Derek had no legal standing. Claire could not force a sale or a transfer without my consent. And if anyone attempted to pressure me out of my own home through any form of coercion, that would be a matter Patricia would take up with considerable enthusiasm. "Gerald," she said, "do not sign anything. Do not let anyone tell you what your rights are in that house. I will send a letter." Patricia's letter arrived at Elgin Street by courier the following Thursday. I happened to be home when Derek opened it. I watched him read it at the kitchen table. I watched his face change. He read it again. Then he looked up at me and said, "You got a lawyer involved." I said, "Patricia has been our family solicitor for 19 years. She was at Eleanor's funeral." He said, "This is going to make things very difficult." I said, "Derek, I replaced the wiring in this house when Claire was 9 years old. I put in the gas fireplace in the living room the winter after she started high school. I built the deck out back this summer. Eleanor was doing her chemotherapy so she would have somewhere comfortable to sit in the afternoons." I paused. "I am not leaving." Claire came into the kitchen then. She had heard. Her face was difficult to read. I had spent 66 years learning to read faces, and I could not read hers in that moment. I said, "Claire, your mother left me something I didn't know about. She planned ahead the way she always did. I am going to be fine. But I need you to understand what this house means. And I need you to tell me honestly, is this coming from you, or is this coming from Derek?" There was a long silence. Claire said, "He told me it was the practical thing." I said, "Eleanor's rose bushes were the practical thing too, until they weren't." That landed. Derek left the house that weekend. He drove back to Vancouver alone. I later learned from a conversation I was not supposed to overhear. Claire was on the phone in the backyard and did not realize I had come out the side door, that Derek had wanted to flip the Elgin Street property from the beginning. He had already spoken to a real estate agent. He had already gotten a valuation. The retirement community in Canada had been his idea entirely. Claire had gone along with it because Derek had a way of presenting things as obvious and inevitable until you stopped questioning them. It took my daughter several weeks to say all of this to me directly, but she did say it. We sat at the kitchen table one evening in July with tea, the way Eleanor and I used to sit, and Claire talked for a long time and I listened. I am not a man who finds that easy, the listening without interjecting, the patience required, but I have been working on it for 66 years and I managed. I did not tell her I was angry, though I was. I did not tell her how it had felt to stand in my own living room and be handed a brochure for a retirement home. I did not tell her about the moment in the bank when I realized what her mother had done for me, and how that realization had felt like Eleanor placing her hand on my shoulder one final time. I told Claire instead that I wanted her to stay. Not in the way Derek had proposed, not as some arrangement of convenience, but because she was my daughter, and this was still her home too if she wanted it to be. She stayed. She got a job at a planning firm in Centertown. She kept the main guest room, and we worked out what two adults sharing a house actually looks like when both of them are honest about it. In September, I used a portion of Eleanor's savings with Patricia's guidance and the advice of a fee-only financial planner I found through the Ottawa Community Foundation to set up a small trust designated for home, maintenance, and, eventually, for whatever care I might need in later years. I did not want to leave those decisions to chance or to whoever might find it convenient to make them for me. I also hired a landscaper to restore the south fence garden. I did not try to replicate Eleanor's exact planting because that would have been impossible and, I think, a little sad. But I found a woman at the Lansdowne Farmers Market who sold heritage rose varieties, and I bought 4 of them, and I planted them on a Saturday morning in late September, while Claire watched from the back steps with her coffee. She came outside eventually and helped me press the soil down around the last one. She said, "Mom would have had opinions about the spacing." I said, "She would have been right too." We stayed out there for a while after that, not talking, just in the garden that used to be Eleanor's and was now something we were both responsible for. The light in the afternoon in late September in Ottawa is a particular kind of light, long and amber and honest, and it fell across the yard the way it always had, through the branches of the maple that I had planted as a sapling the year Claire was born, which was now taller than the roofline and showed no signs of stopping. I am not a man who had a dramatic revelation. I did not arrive at some clean and satisfying conclusion the way stories sometimes pretend things resolve. What I know is this. Eleanor spent 20 years quietly making sure I would be all right. She did not do it because she thought I was weak. She did it because she loved me in a specific and practical and completely characteristic way, and because she understood things about the future that I was too busy living in the present to see. I think about that often now. I think about what it means to prepare something for someone you love without ever telling them, to carry that quietly for 20 years, to trust that they will find it when they need it. I also think, more than I expected to, about Derek. I do not hate him. He was not a villain in any interesting sense, just a man who saw an opportunity and was not honest about it, to Claire or to me or, I suspect, to himself. I have known men like that my whole working life. They are not rare. What I try to hold on to, when the house is quiet in the evenings and I sit in my armchair by the window with the local news on low, is the fact that I am still here. That I know where the creek is on the staircase and which circuit the back bedroom runs on, and why the hot water in the upstairs bathroom takes 40 seconds longer in winter than in summer. I know this house. I built most of it with my own hands. And no one is going to slide a brochure across my coffee table and tell me my time here is finished. Eleanor made sure of that. She made sure of it 20 years before I knew I needed her to. And every morning when I come downstairs and put the kettle on and look out the kitchen window at the south fence, I think about that. I think about what it means to be loved by someone patient enough to plan for a future you couldn't see yet. I think that is the only thing worth knowing how to do. Subscribe if this story moved you. Leave a comment below telling me which moment hit you hardest. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear that, it is not too late to stand up for what is theirs. Share this with them today.